All right, take two. So this is the third class on color. We're going to be going over a lot of the rudimentary color basics. So if you're more of an accomplished artist, this might be some review for you, but hopefully we'll get over that quickly, and a lot of it will be more case studies and also really thinking about what color means as far as story, because really at the end of the day, that's what's most important in your character design. So let's start with the very, very basics. Here's a color wheel, like a cool color 20-sided die in the middle. I don't know. So your basic color schemes are primary, secondary, and then like some warm, cold, complementary, monochromatic. So primary, most of us already know. It's the red, yellow, and blue are the three colors that cannot be mixed like with paint to make them. They are like prime colors. And from these three colors and black and white, you get all other colors, at least when it comes to mixing paint. Now, we're not going to even get into the physics of light because that's a whole other thing that I don't understand. So primary colors is a popular color scheme, and then there's the secondary colors, which are mixes of the primary colors. So red and yellow makes orange, green is blue and yellow put together. You know this. You went to kindergarten. And then there's complementary, which is opposites on the color wheel, and monochromatic, which is tints and shades of one color. So for some more clarification, here are some more diagrams. I don't know how needed these are. Personally, I didn't even know a lot of these existed. I just kind of throw things together that I think look good. But I do think that it's important to know at least complementary, analogous, and split complementary, because those I think are the most common color combinations used. And also, like on a color wheel, this is only dealing with the most saturated of hues. This isn't even addressing what looks good when it comes to different tints and shades, which we're going to get into right now. There's a difference between hue, saturation, and brightness. And I'm going to be using these words a lot, so pay attention. Hue is the color, and in this graph, it's the most saturated version of the colors, the true hue. So like pink isn't a true hue, it's a tint of red. So it's not red at its most saturated. Now there are some very saturated pinks, but you could argue that it's not true. It's not its own color. It's always going to be like a dilution of red. And then there's saturation, which goes from, it's like a gray scale of a color. So desaturated would be gray, and then fully saturated would be the true hue color. And then there's brightness, which kind of goes from black to white, and then in the middle would be the true hue full saturation color. And so when it comes to brightness, a tint is adding white to the hue, and a shade is adding black. And then you make grays and browns by mixing complementary colors. And when it comes to grays and browns, it really depends on how much of a color you put in. For example, if you were mixing blue and orange, which are complementary on the color wheel, if you put in more blue than orange, you're going to get more of a gray. If you put in more orange than blue, you're going to get more of a brown. But really, when it comes to painting especially, you just blend whatever you want to make the color that you want. Like, you don't have to keep all these in mind. But when it comes to choosing color schemes, these are definitely things that you need to keep in mind. So another important thing to keep in mind when it comes to choosing colors for a color scheme is dissonance and harmony. So for a really quick visual thing on what dissonance and harmony is, I made dissonance and harmony in my cute little title for this slide. In dissonance, you've got that really stark contrast between the complementary red and green right up against each other, whereas in the word harmony, there's tints or shades, intervals between the H and the Y on harmony, which helps it become more harmonious, even though it's still a complementary color scheme. Dissonance often occurs from overly saturated or high contrast colors being put next to each other. So it's not just really saturated or complementary colors. It could also be like white and black, or really dark blue next to a really light green, or whatever. That causes dissonance because there's like a stark contrast between those two things. You can create harmony by putting more intervals of color between two dissonant colors. So in the top right image, you see a very stark dissonance between all these really saturated colors and between like the black and the red and the black and the yellow. It's like very eye-catching, very extreme. On the bottom, you have a gorgeous landscape painting, which is still like a complementary or even split complementary color scheme, but they've put in a lot of intervals between the colors and also desaturated a lot of the colors so that you get more of a calm feeling. It's not so in your face. The bottom image would do better for like a background than the top image, because the top image would take away way too much from the characters. However, dissonance can really help if you're trying to bring out like a really unsettling feeling, or it can even be used as like a 3D effect when you're working digitally, especially. I've seen a few pieces that I was like, how did they make it 3D on my computer screen? And it's because of the dissonant colors. They really push against each other. But most coloring will be harmonious, and harmonious is probably what you should aim for when choosing a color scheme for your characters. So now we're going to go through a bunch of different color schemes in case studies. So the first will be primary colors. Primary colors are really popular when it comes to character design, especially for like iconic character design. Like primary colors really stick in the brain. They're very good for children's characters like Winnie the Pooh, Elmo, Big Bird, Cookie Monster. Like none of those characters have all three primary colors, but having them be primary colors makes them more immediately recognizable and I think processable for young kids. Usually you get all three primary colors in superheroes or heroes in general, and a specific kind of hero, like a hero that is known for their purity or justice or like determination, like very stalwart character traits, are characters that will have all three of the primary colors in their designs. And see, like Mario and Sonic, they use the yellow as more of a highlight, but it's still there. Another example would be like Spider-Man. He doesn't have the yellow in his costume, and it does give a different feel. He feels more complex. If you were to imagine fully primary colored Spider-Man, well, I guess like the Iron Spider suit, it has gold in it as well. It feels more like a fully developed, mature superhero instead of like a more relatable young superhero. That's my personal opinion, but that's the feeling that I get from it. And a lot of color is feeling. Like red gives you a certain feeling, blue gives you a certain feeling, and then combinations give you a certain feeling. So like while red by itself is danger and passion and blood, you put it with blue and yellow and you get a completely different feeling. And you also notice that these are very saturated colors as well. There's no subtlety in this. It's supposed to be very easy to digest and very open and honest with these colors. If you were to dilute these colors, you would get a totally different feel. So another common color scheme is monochromatic. I have the problem of assuming monochromatic means like grays and blacks, But when I was looking up these pictures, I was like, I want to make sure that that's not all I include, because monochromatic is so much more than just gray. And something I think is true with all of these characters, at least, is that monochromatic color schemes are good for morally gray or characters whose motive is subject to change. So like Elsa is like a constantly changing, growing character, more subdued. She isn't made of a lot of colors like Anna is. It's like one color, and it's like subtleties of that color. For the Cardcaptor Sakura character, which I actually have not seen it, I was just looking for monochromatic stuff, and I was like, oh, I recognize that person. I'm guessing her name is Sakura. But a lot of anime characters tend to be very subtle. Like they start with a trope, but then as you watch the series, you're like, oh, this person's actually very damaged, or they have very nuanced opinions on life, and their motives are very subject to change. So that makes sense to me that an anime character would have a monochromatic color scheme. And it's just like a nice monochromatic color scheme. It's pink. And so you've got like the dark pink and the really light pink and the white. Like, it's a really nice use of monochromatic color schemes. So a really popular one is complementary colors. These are very energetic. They are youthful, but they can also show a conflict within the character. And again, these are very saturated. And I think if you were to take complementary colors and make them more desaturated or darker, put them in darker tints, you would get a much more nuanced character. Like the anime character on the far right, he has the complementary colors of red and green, which is the main focus of his character design, at least in this picture, I think. But it's much subtler than the other ones, who are very like bright and colorful. Like, he has some more nuance to him, and again, I think that really goes with the anime feel tone. And I know that Robin is like a grittier character as well, has a very checkered past, but this design is from the Batman that aired like on the CW or something. So it was for kids. They weren't going into like the murder of his parents and stuff like that. So his design is much more saturated to appeal to young kids. But yeah, so all of these characters are very energetic characters, very driven, and their color scheme really goes into that. Like, you notice complementary color characters, and all of these characters, I think, are about being noticed. So the next one is complementary color schemes between characters to show conflict. So the top left one is obviously Loki and Thor. Their designs are particularly interesting because Thor's main color is blue, which is not complementary to anything going on in Loki's. And they both share gold, so there's like that combining color between them that shows a connection. But then there's the red and the green, which shows like very obvious conflict. So it's just I really like Thor and Loki's designs just across the board in any iteration. I like bringing their costumes up. So to the right of that is Kim Possible and Dr. Draken, orange and blue, very, very blue. So just classic villain hero dynamic. Same thing with Peter Pan and Captain Hook. And then in Rey and Kylo Ren, white and black aren't strictly complementary. They're not on the color wheel. They are opposites. But there's obviously like she's the light side of the Force, he's the dark side of the Force, But opposing color schemes can also mean just two friends that have very different personalities, like Woody and Buzz in Toy Story. They also come from two very different worlds. So Woody's earthy, warm color tones go much better for a Western, and then Buzz's super clean look is very much more suited to a sci-fi. On the other side of the coin, characters who are romantic partners or friends might have similar or coordinating color schemes. So they'll either have colors that look really good together, like are analogous, or like they share colors, kind of like Loki and Thor, how they share a yellow. One of my favorite examples of this is the Avengers. How like Thor has red, and Iron Man has red, and Captain America has red, and Captain America and Thor both have blue, and Hawkeye is purple, which is a combination of the two, and then Hulk has purple, and keep wanting to call her Scarlet Witch because Scarlett Johansson plays Black Widow. Black Widow has like some highlights of blue and or red depending on the movie, so they all have like a kind of flowing color scheme of red and blue or some combination thereof. And so then in the Avengers, their opponent is Loki, who is green, which the only character on the Avengers who is green is the Hulk. Who Loki uses as a pawn. But he's not even green all the time. So when he's not hulked out, the only green character is Loki, which shows that opposing color force. And they definitely did that on purpose. So that's not always like a hard and fast rule. Like I know Big Hero 6, their color schemes are pretty different. So it just depends on the story. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind when doing color schemes is color association. So the strongest one that I could find in like animation and comics and stuff is purple and green and black is evil color scheme. I could only think of one other character who's a hero who uses this color scheme, but they have other colors added in. But if you take out that other color, then it becomes the evil color scheme. Again, this isn't a hard and fast rule. You could decide, I want to make a superhero and they're going to be these colors, but there is this color association. And again, it's tied very specifically to these very saturated, very true colors. So if you were to take like the green, for example, and make it more of a blue-green, then that changes the whole dynamic. It has to be these colors specifically that give off kind of an evil vibe. But again, like you add a complementary into the mix, like if you put a red in there, then you get Ariel or Starfire. Having red and green and purple gives a very different feeling than this one. So just something to keep in mind, that color association. All right, so before we go into assignments, one of your assignments is going to be developing color palettes for your character. But here are some other tips. So not all of the colors have to be used equally. I'm going to suggest that you pick 5 colors, and at least one of those will only be like a highlight color. You'll barely use it. So like you can see like with the Hatsune Miku on the left at the bottom here, you've got blue, which is used the most, that aqua blue, and then the dark gray is used second most, and then the gray, and then the skin tone, and then the highlight is that bright pink. So you see that like it's kind of like the size variance that we talked about in an earlier class. You want to kind of do the same thing with your colors. And you don't have to use all 5. Like if you're like, well, my character is just like a Winnie the Pooh kind of character, like I don't need a bunch of color, that's fine. But also, I feel like 5 is usually a good number to then grow or decrease from. The next thing is limit the amount of saturated colors that you use. So again, with like the Hatsune Miku one, the most saturated color in her design is her hot pink highlights. So they bring focus into her face, but they don't overwhelm it. And there are some like designs that use like really saturated hair color, but again, that draws into the face where you're going to be like connecting the most with a character. If you're going to put saturated colors on a character design, that's either you use it as a highlight or you put it on the head. Like that would be my suggestion. You don't want to have like really super bright like knee-high socks, because then people are just going to be staring at their socks all the time and not anywhere else on the character. So just keep that in mind. Kind of tend towards darker or lighter. Try to stay away from those true hues. And keep the story in mind. Like, do colors have significance in the story? What do the colors you choose say about the character? So, like, on the right down there, there's Daria, and you can tell by her expression, but also by her very earthy tones, that she's a very down-to-earth kind of character. She's not flashy. All of her colors, they're more saturated and warm, but they're also shades. They're dark. And so you get that she's kind of a complex character, but not cold, you know? So, but other things to keep in mind is like, okay, so your character is a peasant, so are they going to be wearing bright colors and, you know, things that might be very expensive in your world? If you've got a cowboy, are they going to be wearing a lot of blue and purple? Like, does that make any sense? So keep these things in mind. Last tip is to check your color balance and readability. This is easier if you're using a computer to color, but you do this by making the picture grayscale to see if there's a good contrast between the colors. So you can see here on the left, like at the bottom with the that says bad contrast, there's like a lot of color dissonance. Like, it hurts to look at, kind of, but they're the same saturation pretty much. So when you turn it to grayscale, you can barely read the bad contrast. Whereas at the top, you've still got like a lot of dissonance because it's a light color and a dark color, lots of contrast. But when you put it into grayscale, as you can see, you can still read it loud and clear. And that's the thing. Like, you need to be able to read it really well. So if you're not doing them on a computer, another thing you could do is like take a picture with your phone and then go to editing and put it on grayscale and see how it looks. If you're getting a bad contrast thing going on, then you need to make your darks darker and your lights lighter, and then see where from there. You want to make sure, again, that you're getting a lot of good clear readability on the face. Really make sure that that face is really clear and easy to read. So, assignment. Come up with 5 color schemes for your character. So these are some color palette websites. I'll have them linked down below. I think one of these also, you can like upload a picture and it will tell you what colors are in there. So if there's like a classical painting or something that you really like the colors on and you want to use some of those, that would be a good way to kind of break it down. Here are the color schemes that I came up with. As you can see, a lot of them are very similar because I knew I didn't want like a super bright, flashy, flamboyant character, because my fox samurai, I feel, is more introverted and stoic, kind of the earth. So there's no pinks or purples or reds or anything like that. I stayed more in cool colors. And then when I was looking at some of my reference, up at the top right, there's like the procession of the foxes, which is a traditional Japanese picture, and they're all gray foxes, even though they have the pigment to make an orange. So I was like, oh, well, gray actually fits my character's personality better, so maybe I could do some iterations with gray. So this is what I came up with. Out of these 5, I think I'm settling more towards these 2. So I've got, you know, a gray one on the left, orange one on the right. Now, if I were to put these in grayscale, the one on the right would definitely read better. Like, if I want to use the one on the left, I'm probably going to put some of that detailing in the face that I put on the one on the right. And like when I was doing more coloring, I would definitely put more light shades and tints into the one on the left so that you can kind of see more of his shape easier, like the one on the right. So I'm still not sure which one I like best. Put your opinion down below and we'll see which one I pick for my final sheet for this character. But that's about it. If you have any questions, you can put them down below and I will get to them. I will also have linked down below some other resources for colors theory and stuff like that. This is the third out of 4 classes. I think the next class will be the last one. But I think I'm going to take next week off to give you guys some time to catch up on assignments. If you're new, to go back and watch the other ones and to do the assignments. As always, the Discord link is down below. Let me know if it goes invalid for some reason. I think they change it like every day or something, or every week. I might put a new video out during that time. I'm not sure yet, and I'm not even sure if it's going to be live or not. But yeah, and let me know if you like this better than me doing a live thing. I don't think I'm going to cut this one up very much, so I don't know if it's going to be even shorter than the other ones, if there's going to be that much of a difference. So yeah, so I will talk to you guys in the next one. Bye. The two ends of the word, the H and the Y, but then I put there are cupboards in my kitchen that open by themselves, and every time they do that, it terrifies me. Okay.